So I want to welcome everybody. Obviously, we've still got people signing in. My name is Joel Baker. I'm the Vice President of Appraiser Advocacy here at Alamode. Been an instructor with the company now for almost a decade and a half, and want to welcome you guys. I've seen some of you in previous classes before. Obviously, Wendy, good to see your name pop up there again. I'm going to open Total here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the sample file that's built into Total, and I'm going to use that as my example here for this class this afternoon. I'm doing so because this will give us, data that we already have that I can use, but also it gives you the ability to open that exact same report on your system as well. And so you can follow along, right along with us. And like I mentioned earlier, if you will, put any of your questions or comments into the chat window. We have with us one of our other instructors. Tiara will be with us today, and she'll be answering any questions that I don't get to there in the chat window. So Tiara will say hi to everybody here. Again, I'm going to open the sample file. This is inside of Total. It's built into the tutorial folder here. And again, like I mentioned, you also can open up your version of this exact file. Now we're going to want to make sure and unsign that report, obviously, so that we can make changes to it. So today's class, I'm going to give an overview of the side-by-side just briefly. I know some of you use the side-by-side power view inside of Total on a regular basis, but to be quite honest, having talked to literally thousands of appraisers about how they use our software, I have found that there are a substantial number of appraisers that are still focused on the forms power view and filling out the grids in the forms power view and don't really use the side-by-side very often. And so I want to make sure that we're all comfortable with the layout of the side-by-side view. So like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to remove the appraiser signature, just like you'll need to do on this file. This way we'll be able to make changes to it. And I'll click on the side-by-side power view button up at the top. We're still getting a lot of folks that are signing in. That is excellent, excellent, excellent. Down at the bottom, I'm going to zoom in a little bit on my grid here, so that it's a little bit easier for you folks to see. I'm going to zoom in probably further than you are right now, but that just, I think, makes it easier for everybody to see things on screen. First of all, you need to know that in the side-by-side power view, it is a true side-by-side. It is not a forms side-by-side where you have as you are with other software, with what they call a side-by-side power view, where they put, page 2 up against the additional comparables page. So you got 2 pages side-by-side. These are actually comparables side-by-side. I have 6 here, and you notice if I can scroll to the right here, that I can actually see all 6 of my comparables all at the same time. I'll stop sharing my webcam here, and this way it will allow you guys to go a little bit more full screen. Karen, down at the bottom, the zoom functionality is down here at the bottom. I just changed my zoom level down here. The next thing are the quick lists. If you've had any of my previous classes, like somebody mentioned earlier, one of the classes yesterday about mobility where we talked about quick lists, the quick lists are over here on the left-hand side. It's not really the purview of this class to talk about the form-filling aspect of quick lists. Just realize that they are available with any one of these fields, as well as is the math calculator, always exposed. Same calculator that you get when you do Control-M, but in the side-by-side power view, we always expose that. For our purposes today, I'm going to hit the F9 key on the keyboard so that we can go full width here. It turns off that left-hand panel there for those features and lets us focus on the things we want to talk about for this particular class today. Just know that F9 is the keyboard shortcut to toggle that on and off. At the top, you get a property summary, the price and suggested value. We will circle back around at the end and talk about where this number comes from in particular. Notice that if you hover over a photo, This is for those of us who have larger screen resolutions. You'll notice it expands that photo out so that we can see it a little bit better. And for our comparables as well, we have the price, the gross percentage adjustment, the indicated or adjusted sale price, and the weighting of the comparable. Again, we will talk about what the weight is, where that number comes from here in just a little bit. Notice that if you want to rearrange your comparables, say I want comp 5 to slide over and be comp 2, I can literally, at the top of comp 5 here, I can click and drag that comparable from its spot as number 5, and now it's number 2. And yes, it actually does rearrange all of the photos on the photo pages. You'll need to get a map again, but it does rearrange the photos on the photo pages. So let's talk about ways to get comps into the report first. There are several ways to make sure that this happens. Obviously, you can just simply type a comparable in. I'm not going to go through that because that's real pedantic and everybody knows how to make that happen. Another way that I'm not going to demonstrate is just some general form filling, how you start a report. Some folks will merge in completed data from a previous report. When you start a new report, you'll merge in a report you did, last week in the same neighborhood, perhaps, or something of that nature. But there's also, in addition to the merge feature, there's, I think, a better way to take comparables out of an existing report that you know about and reuse them in this report. I want you to think about it this way. If you're going to merge a previous report, and you're going to bring in comps 1, 2, and 3 out of that report into this one, well, you're missing the one property out of that report that has the most data in it, the one with which you're most familiar, right? The subject. So how do you bring across the subject into this report? Well, that's actually done, I think, in a much more efficient manner, is done through the Old Reports button up here at the top. So when I click on Old Reports, I can browse out to wherever I've got another file, click on that particular file, find it if I need to in the search box, and you'll notice when I do so, it shows me all of the properties. Now you'll notice subject and then comps 1 through 5. So I've got 6 properties. If I were to bring this across, I've already got comps 1 through 6 in my current report, right? I don't want them to replace. So what's going to actually happen, this is the first time we're going to see this, is whenever you bring in properties from an outside source like this, it actually creates new comparables and on the other end of things. And so comps 1 through 5 in the subject here become comps 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Total will add those forms if I need them added, and it will add in the photo forms as well for those comparables if I don't have them already in there. Total will take care of that for me on the fly. And so that's our first way, is to use the Old Reports button at the top. Another was to reuse comparables out of your comps database. Be clear, a comparable, by the way, equals at the beginning of an address for the grid will actually remove a comparable and the photo and all the data and leave a spot available, that's what I wanted here. That was the equals sign at the beginning of the address field. Watch what happens when I type in, say I find this property on the MLS. Winter Park, Florida 32789. You'll notice Total tells me, hey, you've used this particular address before. Just by simply typing in the address, Total tells me 4 versions used in 4 reports. And here's something else that you need to know about. Total's comparables database is always running in the background at all times. As soon as you sign a report, Total goes into that report and pulls the information for all of the properties out and populates your comparables with all the properties from that report. It populates the database. It also populates your photos database if the photo itself does not already exist in the database. It happens automatically as part of the way Total works. So you don't have to worry about making it happen. Older versions of the software and other some of our competitors make this a mandatory thing where you've got to intentionally do this, but Total is completely automatic as far as keeping the database up to date. So if I come up here to this particular option and I choose to click on that little house icon, what opens is a feature called Smart Address. Let me go full screen on this and zoom in a little bit so we can see this a little bit better here. So what I'm looking at is on the left-hand side, this is what is in the grid. Let's ignore the warnings here. We'll talk about what those are here in a moment. But this is what I have in the grid on the left-hand side. And on the right is a full history of how I've used this property in the past. You'll notice that this is not some meta comparable. That's a sort of a mishmash of what the software or I may or may not think is the best data for a property. It's each one of these is an exact way that I have used it in the past before. Obviously going all the way back to 2009 for these last two. These are pre-UAD, not really that helpful for me. So I'm going to choose to check this box here that says only show UAD comparables, and now I'm limited to just two. Now, the most recent one is over here on the left, and what I can do if I want to reuse this, honestly, seriously, with just a single click here, copy all data, it copies this entire instance, this entire use of this property, and pushes it over into the grid, including, you'll notice, the photo as well. I can, at this point, start to see my inconsistencies. And so you'll notice I have an inconsistency that's flagged here, Q3 and Q4. It's the same sale date, you'll notice, but I've used my Qs differently from one to the other. So this tells me that I have, this is a consistency check as well, right? It tells me that I have used both Q3 and Q4 for the same property, for the same date of sale and MLS number and so forth. That's an oopsie for me. But in Total's Smart Address will show you your inconsistencies. It's designed, in addition to obviously letting you reuse the data, it does show you how you've and whether you've been consistent or inconsistent in your ratings of properties. And you'll notice it's not just the C's and the Q's, it's every field in the grid. Okay. So let me close out of this, and you'll notice I now have, here in number 7, I've now got my McKean circle. Okay. Let's talk about editing our comparables. You'll notice, those of you who were here earlier as part of the class, you remember I was able to drag and drop and manually resequence my my comparables simply by clicking on the header up at the top up here and just simply dragging them around and putting them in the order that I like. But there is a way to automatically sort your comparables. You can sort them by weight, proximity, GLA, indicated or adjusted sale price, actual sale price, contract date, and settle date. Proximity is as the crow flies, obviously. But what is weight? I told you we'd circle back around to this to talk about weight. What is the weight? The weight is actually a calculation. It's a number given to each comparable, and each comparable, when you add all of them together, the weight will equal the number 100. It's a number based on the percentage of adjustments that you've applied to each comparable, meaning the fewer adjustments you've made, the higher the weighted value. And the value, again, for the weight of all of the comparables in the report is, when you sum them, it equals 100 for 100%. but it's a way to weight all of the properties that you have. The ones that are the most comparable, therefore, have a higher number. Park asks, am I going to show the MLS text file importer again? Park, I am not. No, the MLS text, I showed that a couple of times in a couple of different ways, but I got to move on to the other stuff here, and I have. Let's talk about certain hotkeys. Mentioned one earlier about the equals. You hit the equal sign twice at the beginning of the address field, and it clears the comparable. If you hit equals on if you hit equals at the beginning of any of the fields, it actually prompts you with which one you want to copy. And so if I'm in comparable 1 here, if I want this to be the same as the subject, I could do 0. Equals 0 copies the data from the subject to that particular field. The equals key by itself at the beginning of the address field, just hitting it once, actually copies the entire property. So if I have a subject, say it's a cookie cutter home or a condo, for instance, and it would be easier to just simply copy the subject's information completely over into the grid and then make the changes from there. I could do equals 0 at the beginning of the address field for the comp, and it makes a copy of that address. One of my favorite features is the F2 command. I'm going to type leasehold here. Watch what happens when I hit F2. You'll notice it pushes leasehold all the way across. The F2 command is what we call the push command. Let me fix that, put that back. Be simple, F2. It pushes whatever data you have in that field all the way to the right, and it does so across all of your comparables. Allie mentions the E&O. Allie, let's see if that doesn't work again. Keep in mind, one of the things that I recommend that you do is have a multiple monitor system. If you have a multiple monitor system, you should open the E&O Power View, by the way, into its own window. That gives you the ability to have both the E&O warnings on one screen in full screen and either the forms or the side-by-side Power View with all of the tools available for each of those Power Views, whichever one you want, just accessible, and the data goes back and forth. It's one of the great benefits of having a multiple monitor system is the E&O gives you the ability to use everything in either the forms or the side-by-side Power View in conjunction with the E&O. Hugh wants me to talk about the weighting again. Well, again, Hugh, the weight it's based on the percentage of adjustments that you've applied, so that the fewer adjustments, the higher the value. And again, this is what I meant when I said if you take the number of the weight for all of the comparables in the report, they should equal 100 for 100%. Okay. We'll circle back around and talk a little bit more about weighting because that comes into play for the suggested value here in a little bit. One of the other things that you can use is the bird's eye map. Let me come to this McKean circle here. I'm going to click on this button here at the top. It has the little bird's eye, or the little globe icon for the mapping, and this pulls up not just a satellite map, but an actual high-resolution aerial photograph. These are usually taken at oblique angles, and they are often taken at multiple different angles, which you can access just by simply clicking to rotate them. Okay, and you can eventually often reach a point where you can see, for instance, into the backyard and look at the pool, and if there's a house, a little guest house or something that you didn't see, or a shed or whatever, and do some data verification, maybe for a comparable that you couldn't see into the backyard for. And so that's the bird's eye view there at the top. Like I mentioned a couple of times earlier, what I did is I did equals equals to remove a comparable. But what happens if you want to save the data? So let's say that this comp 6 here doesn't quite meet up with my my expectations for this report. It doesn't quite cut the mustard, but it's data. I've done the work on it already. I want to save it. I mean, because sometimes you get the underwriter calls back and they want another comparable or listing or whatever added to the report, and if this were one that would cut the mustard at that point, it would be nice to be able to put that back in. When you click the red X here, Total prompts you to put that property in your work file. You choose yes, you'll notice it doesn't blank out comp 6. You'll notice this McKean circle actually moves over and becomes comp 6. Everybody see that? It slides everything over a slot. Now that comparable, let me go to the work file here, that comparable is actually now in my work file. And like I mentioned earlier, for whatever reason I need to restore this comparable, I can click the restore button here and put it back into my report right out of my digital work file. Wendy asks, do work file comps get saved to the comp database? That is actually an excellent question, and the answer is yes, if you check the box to make it happen. When you sign a report, there is a checkbox at the bottom of the, when you have the insert signed date screen, that little window that comes up, there's a checkbox at the bottom to do that very thing. So yes, you can make that happen. All right, so your UAD data entry for these fields works the same way as it does just in the Forms Power View. I want you to keep in mind that while this is working the way that Total does out of the box, you can turn on, as we talk about in our form filling classes, you can go to the settings, the form settings, and turn on Freeform UAD mode, which gives me the ability to click into a field in UAD format and directly manipulate that without getting the dynamic field expansion. At any time, of course, I can hit Control-Enter to pull that up, but by default, those are hidden, and I can come in here and type, B semicolon golf. And have Total fix that for me as well. This is, again, Freeform UAD mode. So for those of you that use this on the Forms Power View, you'll notice it. You also have access to it in the Side-by-Side Power View as well. Let's take a look at some field formattings here. Across the top here, there's the numbers only, which obviously for adjustment fields. The show 2 decimal places obviously turned off for a UAD report such as this to make it UAD compliant. Showing the commas and the leading plus or minus, these are, UAD doesn't care about them, so those are just choices that you make. And of course rounding, which is always a big question. Round to the nearest 1,000, 500, those are the two most commonly used ones. So I can round that to the nearest 500. And if that's something that I want to do, that rounding, for instance, I want to do and push that choice to all of the adjustment fields in this report, I can click this button here, which pushes that rounding and those field settings to all of the adjustments in this report, round everything to the nearest 500. However, if I want to just set a global rule that says always round to the nearest 1,000, I can actually set that up in the Tools section. So this is, we keep coming back to the tools, I'm sorry, to the settings here in tools. But you go to the forms and scroll down, and there is a global rounding setting. So I can say round to the nearest thousands for everything. And that way you don't have to worry about it again. Kathleen, I'm going to touch on the comps database towards the end. Don asks, can he round some fields and not others? Well, Don, as long as you don't have a global rounding, you can do whatever you want to. The global rounding does enforce the automatic rounding, as well as if you click apply to all. That's obviously the intention is to push that, but you can make an individual change even after the fact if you want to. Okay. Let's take a look at, briefly here, a couple of power user features. I'm going to turn on the detailed view. The detailed view is this button up here at the top that I've just clicked on. And now don't freak out when you see this. It looks like it's a heck of a lot more work, but it's actually not. What we have done here is we've expanded the grid in such a way where every single question that Fannie and Freddie are asking for UAD purposes in case, because this is a UAD form, each one gets its own field. So let me scroll down here to the bottom. So we've got actual and effective, and you'll notice your total bedrooms, total rooms, bedrooms, full baths, and half baths. Again, these are split out into their individual line item questions. This gives you the ability then to make individual line item adjustments. As you'll notice here, I'm making an individual adjustment for full baths and an individual adjustment for half baths separately. Now this doesn't actually print on the form this way because we can't modify the Fannie forms, but this is part of the report. It helps me make a note of exactly what I'm doing so that if I ever get questioned on it 3 or 4 years from now, I don't have to remember or look back in my notes. I've got it right here. So obviously the detail view can be helpful in a lot of aspects. I mean, look at the basement and finished rooms below grade. Fannie Mae is asking you literally 8 different questions, and so we give you 8 individual fields, so you can make 8 individual line item adjustments should you choose to do so. Let's see here. Karen said, would you please go over where to find the UAS button to change fields? I'm not. What do you mean UAD? I'm not, Karen, I don't understand the question. I'm sorry. If you'll clarify that for me. But even though, yes, I realize you were trying to say UAD, I just still don't understand the question. I'm sorry. Change which UAD fields in what manner for what purpose, I would ask. Humberto is asking a question on the side here. Humberto, honestly, I don't have time to do, impossible really to do technical support troubleshooting here. We'll be glad to have somebody get in touch with you after the fact. I'll have one of our technicians give you a call. Thank you, Tira. Tira is setting up a ticket to have somebody give you a call. Okay, a couple of other things here. First of all, if you want to make just a straight percentage adjustment, say I want to make a 5% listing adjustment. Here I can put -5% and hit enter, and what happens is, and I just put that right into the grid, just put the number, and you can either leave it as a positive or put a negative sign in front of it. and then the percent sign after, obviously, and that converts it to a percentage of the sale price of that comparable. Okay, the sale price of the comparable. Another neat thing is Smart Adjust. This is a video that comes up the first time you open it. Let me close that. Smart Adjust lets you make adjustments for literally anything in the grid, and you'll notice I do mean anything, not just the form fields, but the individual detailed view fields as well. Now, the one that's most often used is the one for GLA. So I'll make a $355 per square foot adjustment. When I click out of that field, you'll notice it makes $355 square foot adjustment. And you can do this either as dollars per unit, unit being a square foot. You can do it as a percentage or a percentage of square foot, say 80% SF. But most often it's by unit. In this case, $355 per square foot is, or a dollar amount per square foot is what folks use. Many of us also set a threshold. We don't want to make an adjustment that's just negligible, right? Something that's just too small. And so oftentimes we'll say don't make an adjustment unless it's a certain dollar amount. So I can put don't make an adjustment unless it's at least $10,000. Or don't make an adjustment unless it's at least 100 square feet. In this case, 100 units. You'll notice when I put in 100 here and leave the field, my adjustment for Comp 2 goes away just instantly. And that's because there is less than 100 square feet difference between my subject and Comp 2. So you can do percentages as well. Let's take a look at the date of sale time here. Where on earth did the 0.17% come from? I want you to think about this in terms of units. Remember we talked about the unit a moment ago for square footage. The unit for square footage is a single square foot. The unit for date of sale time is the month, right? That's the lowest number that you can put into this because it's a UAD form, right? And so that's per month. A lot of us, we call it a time adjustment, but it's really obviously just a market adjustment over time, and we tend to think in terms of an annualized adjustment, right? Just pulling up a calculator here, I can say, let's say I want to make a 2% adjustment annualized, but I need to take that and divide it by 12 so I can find what it is per month. And you'll notice when I do so, I get 0.17. And so I can put in 0.17% here to effectively have a 2% annualized adjustment. Now these are numeric fields that we've talked about here. There are tables that you can create for non-numeric fields as well. They're a little bit more detailed and not really the purview of this class. They are power user features, but you can obviously come in and create tables for non-numeric fields. I want to cover two more things here and then we'll be done. The first is the actual comparables database itself. And I mentioned earlier that the comps database is its own entity. It's always running in the background, and Total updates it constantly. Whenever you sign a report, it's updated with the information for that report that you just completed. You can access it by clicking the comps database button up at the top. Now the idea here is to be able to search for properties that you've had in your reports in much the same way that you do inside of your MLS. So for instance, your IQ search over here, you know, a sale date range, GLA range, sale price range, year built, and all of this is customizable. Some things that I might come and add into this might include the say the age field or the proximity, for instance, and the neighborhood name. Might add these fields in. So this is editable. You can change the percentages and the the ranges and so forth. There are defaults, but all of this is modifiable. And on the right-hand side, you can see the details of how you've used that property in the past. And if you find one that you like, you check the box for it and hit place, and it puts a copy of that particular record into your report for you. And that's the purpose of the comparables database. There is a lot to this. I could easily teach a 2-hour class just on this particular feature here, here in the comps database. But that's really what the comps database is about. You have your IQ search, just like you would have in your MLS. You can view the map. You can view a grid layout of the properties that match the criteria. And of course, when you click on each individual item here, you can see how it was used in the past. See the expanded or detailed view over here on the right. Let's see here. Let me go back to the questions for a moment. Rachel asks, with Smart Adjust, can you tell it to always adjust for a feature? For example, always adjust 10,000 for a swimming pool. Smart Adjust will not do that automatically. What you can do is you can, at the top here, Karen, you can, or excuse me, not Karen, Rachel, you can save and load adjustment sets up here at the top. So you can set up not just one thing, but you can set up 7 or 8 or 12 things or whatever for automatic, and then save them. Maybe oftentimes I see folks will save an entire set for one neighborhood and an entire set for another neighborhood and so forth. Tom asks, can you add under contract and actives in the IQ search? Well, Tom, in order to include those, you would, and let me go back to the comps database here. This is your question here in the comps database, the IQ search. You would obviously have to uncheck the boxes for things like sale price and sale date, right? Because those haven't sold yet. But those properties would be in the database. Any property that's in a report, when you sign it, is imported into the database. You would just have to not search, and because obviously having a sale price and having that box checked there would exclude those. The final thing that I really wanted to show here was talking about the suggested value. Let me close the Smart Adjust and close the detail view, make this a little bit more, look a little bit more like what many of you are used to using it on a regular basis. The suggested value is up at the top here. And where does this value come from? The suggested value is derived by multiplying the weight of the comparable by the adjusted sale price of that comparable. And this is where it comes in when we talk about having each of the numbers here for each of the weights. When you add them up, they equal 100 for 100%. If you multiply that by the adjusted price, then that's where we get the weighting for that particular property. And when you click on the plus sign here next to suggested and choose insert, it puts it into the down there near the bottom of page 2 of the 1004 in this case, the value by the sales comparison approach. It doesn't put it down in the very low hand left corner of page 2, but it does put it in the sales comparison approach there on page 2. So that's where the value comes from. It comes from the weight multiplied by the sale price, and then each of those is added up and so forth, made from based on the percentages. All right. Well, that's the end of the class today for what I have. I'm going to stick around to see if there are any more questions that you all have. Otherwise, I want to thank everybody for coming.